Our next guest is a veteran. She worked in military intelligence during the Cold War. Her name is Audrey Mantey.
I want to really thank you guys for having a veteran here to put our voice in the mix. Before I talk about Iraq, I wanted to talk a little bit first about my cat, who's a complete idiot, so it seems fair to throw her into the mix with discussions about politicians and all here. There was a night a while ago, this is a true story, we were having a little family dinner with candlelight, and my cat jumped up in the middle of the table out of nowhere and stood there with her tail just hanging in the candle flame. Did not budge, just stood there, and eventually a little puff of smoke came up out of her tail. And we were sitting there eating our dinner, just watching her kind of in stunned silence with the stench of burnt cat fur kind of wafting over the room. And we didn't have it in ourselves to just shove her off the table because we were so shocked this was happening. And she was just kind of looking back behind herself like, what is that? Who did that? How did that happen? But did not have the sense to move her tail out of the fire. So here we are, in Iraq, and it seems to me that we're not in such a very different situation, sitting here with our own asses in the fire, and we don't have enough sense to just walk away. And, when I think about that, I don't know if the cat thought if she just held her tail there long enough, it would smother out the flames. I don't know if we think if we just put a little more of ourselves into it, a little more money, a little more of our soldiers, that we're going to smother out the flame over there, but that's pretty obviously not going to happen. And we're watching the politicians, and I will admit some of these are politicians that I supported, who I thought would be against the war, but they've been there, kind of like the praying mantises, how when the praying mantises are having sex, the woman praying mantis, she turns her head around and she tends to chomp off the head of the male praying mantis. And I read this description once by Doris Lessing talking about that, talking about it from the point of view of the male, where his head is saying, no, don't do it, don't have sex with her, don't, no, no, no. But his heart is saying, oh yes, now and forever, yes. And this is how I feel also when we watch the politicians, and they're out there making these wonderful anti-war speeches, but when it comes time to vote for funding for the war, they're pushing that yes button. It's sort of like they're looking behind themselves. They can smell that there's something bad there from behind themselves, and they're looking to see, what is that? I don't know how that could have happened. Who can I blame for that smell? That's kind of what I'm seeing. And there's a whole lot of talk about how they have to vote for the funding because the troops are over there. Sort of like the Mount Everest defense. We climb the mountain because it's there, we fight the war because our troops are there. Well, that's not a reason to fight a war. And I think we need to really reject that framing that it's supporting the troops in any way. And I'm saying this as somebody who was one of the troops. One of my friends has got 2 sons in the military. He himself is retired military. One of his sons has done 4 tours in Iraq now and 1 in Afghanistan. That's not supporting the troops. When we deliberately misdiagnose troops that have post-traumatic stress syndrome and we claim it's a personality disorder, so we won't give them any treatment, that's not supporting the troops. I saw some of that healthcare stuff myself, and I want to make the point also that this is not something that's unique to this administration. It's not something that's unique to this war. This is something that's been going on for decades. So when it came out in the news, all that stuff about Walter Reed abusing the veterans, that's not anything new. It's just new that the media happened to cover it once. It's not this war, it's the system. I saw that back in the 80s. My husband and I were both Russian linguists. We were both Soviet analysts. During the Cold War, fighting the Russian communists, woo, saving America from all that. When we got out of the military and my husband needed surgery, the VA wouldn't supply that surgery for him. We didn't have health care, thanks to the American system. The way that he got his surgery, the only way he could afford it, was to fly to Russia, use the Russian linguist skills that he got in the US military, and the Russians gave him the surgery for free. And these are the people that were supposedly our enemy, and they were the ones that we were able to go to when we needed help. So that supporting the troops, we're not doing that. When we hear people saying that, we hear, well, $300 billion, we had to vote for that because we had to support the troops. We got to remember where that money is going for. We can't let people use that framing because the money is not going to the troops. The money is going to the contractors. And there are more contractors in Iraq than there are U.S. soldiers, and they're getting paid more. So every time you hear we're supporting the troops, we need to turn that around and say, no, we're supporting the CEOs and the stockholders. That has nothing to do with the troops.